sources because the responsibility falls on the internet user to correctly evaluate the truthfulness of online resources so as not to contribute to the proliferation of fake news and not be a vehicle of misinformation. And to shed light on that topic is your ultimate tita of Media Civics Lab. She is a publicist, community development advocate, training and event specialist, and research writer. She's passionate about peace and conflict studies, child learning and development pedagogy, indigenous cultures, and mindful living. Right now, she is leading the Conflict Resolution Clinic, which is an educational camp for young emerging leaders in the Philippines. CRC is a simulated negotiation where participants will represent respective country states and promote national interest and sovereignty. She's also managing CLAW Response, the new normal for education, in geographically isolated disadvantaged areas. So, to give us the lecture on reputable digital resources, let's all welcome the PR and Communications Manager of Media Civics Lab, Jara Brillantes.
Hi guys. Let me just share my screen so that I can start my lecture on reputable online sources. Yun. Everybody can see my screen now, right? Right? Okay. So let me start with here we now. I cannot see my own screen. Okay. So the what do we expect in this like a short lecture about reputable online sources? This is exactly to give you online um, what's really the purpose of having reputable online sources. And of course, I will bring you onto how to access reputable online sources and of course, how to use the data and information for your daily lives. So Gab already introduced myself, so I'm not gonna repeat that. But and then since I'm your, that's like you said, I'm your ultimate tita. So if you have questions about the project, you can just tag me in the group chat. And if you have other questions, and if any of my topic is of your interest, feel free to message me in Facebook. Okay. So before we move on, um, we need to understand that there is no widely accepted definition of fake news. The term is it's being used by different people by people for different meaning, and sometimes we use it for candid reasons, for just for fun. I and Gab sometimes use it just for fun, but how can we fight something that we don't all agree with? Yung specific meaning pa lang niya. So one solution that I'm looking at is that we need to step back from the specific term and look at it instead at the various problems kung saan it's really about the sources of information. Today, I will be discussing about reputable online sources. So with this, I will help you out to identify the different purposes on why you need to have validated and reputable online sources, where to access them, and how to use the data and information of this information. So if you can see the picture on this slide, are you familiar with this? So at some time in last year, it has become very viral, and it was posted throughout Facebook that they said it's in Davao, but it's actually in Iloilo. It's a one classic example of, say, if people is not out there and then verify the information, we will all be fed with wrong and false data. But before I move forward, I need you guys to keep these concepts in mind because later on we will dissect the difference of such. So, are you familiar with this concept free access? And we need to distinguish it with the concept open source. Kasi doon tayo later on magdidwell on how reputable the information or the data that we're looking at in the internet. So, as the purpose of The purpose why we need to access reputable online source is that one, primarily policy references. I believe that most of you who are in MCL or Media Civics Lab are youth leaders. Some of you are some SK leaders, and you may be able to use the information that I will share to you later on. The second purpose of accessing reputable online sources is, of course, most of you, including myself, are in school, and we can use it for school and academic purposes. It's more on technical writing. Yeah. So I'm gonna send out to you those information. And lastly, one of the most important reason why you need to use reputable online source is we need to use this as a guide to conduct ourselves in the new sphere of cyberspace. Yan. So first is that listen to this, guys, especially those who are who are in SK positions. Are you familiar with FDPP? So there are a lot of information out there. And most of the time, we criticize the government or organization on how our government budget are used. So if you are going or gearing the way of doing policy changes, initiatives, you may as well go access this DILG website wherein you can get information on how the government is using or um, disbursing the funds. You may as well align your initiatives or your projects on on how your local government uses the money so that you can all be working in parallel. What's good with this site is actually that you can search on your local government. For example, for mine is Iloilo. So I search on Iloilo City and they gave me this information on what's the current status of unliquidated cash advances. The government has created a very transparent portal. And as myself, who is a researcher, we use data from the field and from the local governments or from national agencies in order for us to decide on initiatives, on project proposals, on project to implement in specific communities in the Philippines. So if you are working with or gearing with this kind um, of actions in the near future. And then I believe this is also one of the obstacles of SK right now, right? The budget. So your specific local governments are requesting you to polish on all this documents, and as you go along, you may want to access this site, a very legit because it's governmental, on to parallel your project implementation on how you use the budget on your initiatives. This is like a guide, and then it somehow it's going to be a template and will help you put together your initiatives easier because you'll see how the government does it. The DILG and the local government does it. So I hope that you can really use this because as in research, you use this platform a lot. Of course, if you're working on with the local policies, some of you are SK Federation presidents, you sit in with a very important position. For you to get a reliable information, of course, you need to pattern with existing laws of the land. So this is like the classic and the primary source for that. And let me just give you an example here. For Iloilo City, we have here on the local level, the city posts all the local ordinances. I we are very proud of our city, so I'm not really sure if how this kind of actions is also implemented in other cities. But if not, maybe it's time for you to propose it with your local government units that you're under with, so that it could be full disclosure, and it will be transparent, and it will be the main source of reliable information about what are the new initiatives of the city, what are the focus of the local government, and well, where can non-governmental organization participate? Yeah. So Do you know the importance why there should be online depositories of this information? Um, Primarily government sponsored sites. The importance of this is that you have everything in one place, and it makes transparency and accountability possible for our government officials, especially you who are like a part of the government organization, who's a part of the whole government system. So this kind of information will not just benefit you policymakers, young policymakers, but as well as all citizens, including us who are in nonprofit organization, who are just mainly taxpayers. It opens this whole documentation on how government funds are disbursed and maybe how we can participate in the government initiatives. Of course, for school and academic purposes, let me just show you where we typically have our errors. The easiest way to find out something is to type in youtube.com and say how to, where to, how to get there in YouTube. Do not do not even think about it. Do not YouTube is for fun. It's supposedly be an easy guide, easy information for us, but it's never verified because YouTube is not just free access, but it's open source. Open source means everybody can just upload information there. Anybody, you, me, us, we are currently streamed in YouTube. Anybody and nobody filters the information there. So if anybody will just put them a prank, um, just false information, maybe just to test out some friends if they're gonna believe the the YouTube video that they will post. Um, it's not a verified or filtered source of information. So never cite, never interfere with YouTube, with anything you see in YouTube. The same thing with Wikipedia. There was a time that everything that we write is from Wikipedia. I believe right now, correct me Gab, if um, there right now Wikipedia is now excluded in one of the search results of Google. Before, if you want to look at something, the first the first information that Google will throw into you is information from Wikipedia. This information is also um, open source. It means anybody, you, me, anybody in this classroom can just upload and, in fact, edit information there. You can just put in there a certain country, it's just something you just made up, and it will be up there in Wikipedia. So this is not a verified and reputable online source. So this is not the right place to look for quick knowledge information, all right? So never think about looking at Wikipedia if you want to argue with anyone. And of course, as Filipinos, we are such, most of our lives we're in Facebook. You're sharing your life, you're sharing your lunch, you're sharing your meetings, you're sharing whoever you're meeting with. With that, you are also susceptible with whatever information other people are putting out there. It's not just you putting the information out there. In one way or another, you're gonna see the news feed, and yeah, it will feed you information which is not verified. There is effort from Facebook and organizations like Break the Fake to filter this. However, do not from the point of view, internal point of view of you as someone who will absorb or consume the data and the information, never consider citing or believe anything in Facebook. You see all these pictures about huge cobra. You see this. There was an information weeks months ago about the new ambassador of US in the Philippines. It's it's not verified. So this is not the right place to identify reputable information. So never argue and say, "Oh, I've seen in Facebook that." Yeah. Well, for academic purposes, I sincerely introduce to you JSTOR.org. So if you're a researcher, you're in school for dissertation, for term papers, for whatever academic assignments that you have, you can just search on JSTOR.org. Why is it verified? Because it's peer reviewed. The academic community have to filter the information that goes out there. The research, as you all know, undergoes strenuous process. You'll have to sit down together with the expert, with industry leaders. It will undergo um, editing from your editor in chief, such alike. So everything that goes out there, the academic community have the liability if the information that reach or posted in their platform is erroneous. So we can contend that that this information in online journals, academic online journals, are peer reviewed and are verified. And of course, since JSTOR is paid, us researchers we invest on it. It might not be accessible for everyone because you need to have a payment. But yeah, you can ask your university library if you have access with online journals that are paid. Some universities have that access. But if your university or your school doesn't have access, you can just go ahead and type in scholar.google.com, not google.com. Google specifically created a subsite, a filter on where to find information. It will give you verified online journals, academic online journals that you can use for school, for research, for policy making references, things alike. So I hope this one can help you because this one's free. I can also recommend to you top three free access journal sites. You can go ahead and check on Core, or you can also check on Directory of Open Access Journals and Institute of Education Sciences. Yeah. So you may want to screenshot this, or we will give you a copy of the videos anyway. You can access it in our YouTube and yeah, in our online platform. But specifically, you need to make sure that if you're working on academic or school requirements, technical writing, even as researchers, we are on the sites. So make sure that you're citing peer-reviewed sources because it strengthens your arguments, your point of view, and such. Now, let me just go back to you. Am I fast? Let me know. Um, can we now differentiate free access from open source? Can we now differentiate? So, what's free access? Free access means anyone can access the data and information. But in open source, anyone can make the data and information available to you, regardless if it's peer reviewed or if it's filtered or it has um, undergone filter if it's false or not. So you need to make sure that when you access information, you don't read or base on open source information because these are not again verified. Anyone can just post a false information and claim it's true or real, like putting up a WordPress site and put information there. Nobody fact checks websites unless of course somebody's gonna call attention of a specific country's cybersecurity department. But generally, anyone can just put up information in websites. That's open source. You have to make sure that you have these concepts in mind as you look at websites. Well, like I told you, the last purpose for this, just for the purpose of this discussion, the purpose of why you need to identify reputable online sources is that it will help us. It will be a guide to conduct in our specific communities. We all belong to specific cities, um, barangay, crowd, and information that we'll get from the internet will help us out, you know, create proper order. Well, one is that imagine it will help us be less or be non-discriminatory as educated sector of the society, and of course later on as graduates or alumni of Media Civics Lab. Please please make sure that you will have the same advocacy as us to inform but never exclude other people with the knowledge. Knowledge is all out there, however not it doesn't reach everyone. It's our duty educate the educated sector to inform them, but we should never shame them that you don't know this and don't know that. What we can do is that we inform them and include them to this huge crowd of people who understand. Never discriminate. The next one is, of course, it will help us with our decisions for our actions. I believe a lot of us, including myself, we all wanted to go back in school and then face our teachers, be with our classmates, go to meetings, sit down in the same office with our colleagues, sit down in a meeting face to face, so everything's going to be clear. But right now, as we look at the information, verified sources, of course, are we now ready to go back and mingle with a number of people? We all wanted internally that we all wanted to go outside and say it has greatly affect our well-being. People get depressed. People now feels weaker because they don't get enough sunshine, and it's clearly not good for well-being generally. However, reading information in the internet, we ask ourselves, are we ready to go outside? We need to read on and involve ourselves with this huge discussion because it will clearly affects us personally. So again, please, when we decide on what we want, consider information that we read from the internet, of course, from the verified sources. And influence can rather be proper or informal. It has come to my knowledge because I'm not really a fan of using Twitter, but it has come to my knowledge that there is such thing as Twitter wars. So in Twitter war, we shame, we argue, we question people which are not the same, which are of not the same ideals as us. So we argue with them, we defame them, we make fun of them. However, why don't you use these platforms for better? Informal platforms doesn't mean, I don't mean that Twitter is an informal platform. It's not on the platform, it's on how we use the platform. Moving forward, let's see here. Facebook. So Facebook is also, like I mentioned to you, is a open source platform. Everybody can put in information there. I'm blunt. I can just say that in Facebook, but I'm not. But we can use this platform for proper purposes. Let's say informing ourselves. Are you familiar that in the last 24 hours there was a news that Pfizer and BioNTech, can you see that here in the screen, has created a vaccine which is like 90% effective. So it's not verified yet because the academic and the scientific community hasn't released the full research. However, this can somehow give us a hindsight on what life could be in the next few weeks or next few months. This is actually very positive news, something we need to hear. I'm really glad that I've read this in the last 24 hours and I just added it in this slide. We'll just have to wait for a verified research posted in the internet or perhaps statement from um, verified media outlets. Okay. And please make sure that, like I mentioned to you earlier, as part of this crowd that is already on the process of getting educated on on identifying what's false information and what's not, be part of this big effort to inform others. I volunteered with Break the Fake movement in order to make this happen, just sharing my skill set and sharing my time. And if you have questions, you have here on the screen my personal email address. And if you have questions, if you want to ask more about the online sources, especially for school, uh, just message me. I'm also in the group chat. Sometimes I send the message there and I'm trying to engage you all. So I hope this short discussion about reputable online sources really helped you out. So thank you. And let me just throw in back to Gab the screen.
Okay, thank you so much, Tita Jara, for such a discussion. Ano? Now, let's open the question and answer portion kasi masyadong mabilis, nagmamadali si Tita Jara. Masyadong no, mabilis si Tita. So, fire away guys, like drop your questions right here in the comment section below, the chat section below. I mean, actually to the right of the screen. And then while we're at that, let's ask Ate Jara one question. So this is a question coming from me, no? Uy, sino yun? Si J. Ford ba yun? Is there anyone asking a question?
Jayford, would you like to ask a question? All right. You must accidentally click
Okay,
the.
accidentally siguro. Okay. Oh yeah, so Paolo is gonna ask after my question. Let's ask this question muna kay Tita Jara. First question. Is there a situation where open source is more reliable than those sources that are vetted by academic peer reviews and a lot of like a lot of layers of verification methods and stuff like that? Because the context behind this is on fake news, for example, like the rampancy of fake news. We know that a lot of institutions, stakeholders, even governments are difficult to trust at the time of pandemic and even at the time of non-pandemic. It's so difficult to trust anyone right now. So at a situation where it's difficult to trust, is there a situation wherein is it possible that open source could be more reliable than those sources that has come through a lot of peer reviews and academic vetting?
All right. So, yeah. So, just to refresh you guys with my background, I'm really more on academic researches and think tank research. Not that it's more effective or more reliable. It's that open source information, like I said, something that everybody can just contribute in. They're more relevant for the moment. Let me just cite you an example. If you've heard how Gab introduced me, my research area is really more on peace and conflict. So whoever here is from Caraga region, right? Anybody from Caraga region? News agencies doesn't really talk much about Caraga. I'm not sure why, but I remember that not until people exactly internally from Caraga region starts talking about the mining, it didn't reach the mainstream media. A lot of researchers wanted to write about it, the environmental destruction, about the mining in the southeastern side of the Philippines. However, nobody is really talking about it until people started posting about it in social media. The late Gina Lopez really featured it in her initiatives. It's hi Ken, yeah, he's from Caraga, right? Nobody really talks about this topic. So this when I was there and conducting my own research when I was in Tandag and Lanusa area, I believe the only way to surface and make this as a national concern is that when people starts talking about it from the grassroots level. Don't get me wrong, even though I'm academic, I work with nonprofit and I believe in the power of non-governmental or people's organization. So that's something that that's more effective because you can be relevant. You can easily put it out there. However, if it's in research, like what God mentioned, there's a certain layer. You have to write it for 1 month, 6 months, and sometimes it gets edited out by your editor because or by your research team because it wasn't relevant with the whole research goal. So it's important that um, we encourage citizen journalism. I believe Rappler started with citizen journalism, and that's why a lot of information from different parts of the country became mainstream. But we should, yeah, be a little bit cautious with how open this information is. It can be relevant, but it could also be randomly erroneous.
Okay. Sige, let's have ipa-unmute na lang ng mic mo, Paulo, for your question.
And hi, good evening. Can you hear me
Hi,
well? I'm
Paulo.
having an erratic internet connection right now.
No, you're clear,
Just
actually.
okay. For my question it is somehow related on discussion yesterday with Miss Janet. Napaisip lang kasi ako because I'm working on a government where I focus nga talaga on the training also. Uh, Up to what extent but kasi ang sabi sa akin pag once you're in the government automatically the documents should be in public. I mean it's for the public access. Napaisip lang ako up to what extent ba talaga na dapat maging parang is it a free access or an open source yung mga materials, for example the slides na from the speaker. Will it be automatically publicly shared na ba talaga sa mga participants ng training? Yun sa mga ganoong bagay lang. Yun lang.
Go, Jara.
Okay, ako mag-answer.
Mm.
Generally, you probably have more knowledge about this because you're with the government. I never work with the government, but I work with the government for some contracts. But generally, information should be transparent, especially with the disbursement of government funds. The sharing of government of knowledge, especially for DepEd, it should be public so that your accountability is open is it should be open for anyone. Us taxpayers should be able to access this information. However, specifically, I know there are certain information, especially concerning about national security. We cannot publish that. Um, there are some information, like I mentioned, my background is in peace and conflict. There are some information coming from the AFP that it should not be out there because it concerns generally national security and national interest. So, but for purpose of education, knowledge sharing should be public. Uh, I also believe that there are some information like contributions should not be public because they don't want to contribution for certain projects should not be public because it affects the private individuals. Anything that is beyond private individuals, it should not be given out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to add to that, Paolo. No, number one, you have to balance the interest of all the parties involved. So if you are the producer of that particular information, you have to understand that there is a risk when it comes to putting that particular information out there in public, especially because before you go to that engagement, you already know the level of audience that you're going to get, the traction and the mileages. So obviously there is a risk for reproduction. The other lens that you have to take into account here is on the side of the consumer, that distributor of information. Kasi you have to understand, ano ba yung extent of reproduction na gagawin nitong consumer ng information. So, um, is there a malicious intent coming from, if for example let's just say na ikaw yung person A, receiver of this publicly displayed information, what's the extent of reproduction that you're doing? And that's where our educational trainings are actually intended for, because we wanted to educate people na if it's within the sanction of I mean, there are clear boundaries of what's moral, of what's acceptable. If I do perceive an information online, if I receive that information, it's clearly for personal uses, that's okay, because the information was available, I'm consuming it, but I'm not reproducing it for commercial purposes. But if the malicious intent is there, that's when you start questioning that baka bawal to. So I always have this kind of gut feeling that, if you start asking yourself that it's probably wrong, it's more likely wrong, right? So when you have that gut feel, you are somehow a media literate and educated person. So that's what we're trying to achieve here. That at the very least, sana lahat ng mga citizens ng Pilipinas have that kind of skepticism in reproducing content that are publicly displayed online.
Yeah, I think whatever Gab just mentioned responds to the question of Michael in our group chat. Yeah, let me just read that. Are you familiar with Lambert Academic Publishing? To my colleagues had their research papers published as a book and now sold online with their permission. Upon checking online sources, the research papers have been widely proliferated in various sites. Is lab predatory? I think that's exactly the point of what Gab mentioned about the purpose of. I mean, what's the extent and limit of the reproduction of the material? If lab is like a paid site, they shouldn't be posting it out there, right? Anything you want to say, Gab? Yeah.
No, I'm not saying anything.
That's the thing. Yeah. So you have to make sure that you have copyright you have agreements with Michael. You ask your friend if they have agreement with lab, like exclusivity, like it's not should not be reproduced or posted somewhere else. Where because I think this is more of like a copyright issue, something like si Miss Janet yung may authority to talk about. Yeah. But for this matter, you need to review the kind of contract that your friends and lab has, because if it's part of the contract that it will be redistributed in other sister online platforms, well, probably that's probably just right. But if not, then there might be some problem with this.
Natatawa ako kasi yung mga questions nila tonight is an extension of mga questions from last night, yung session with on copyright. So, tapos kagabi, ang dami pa kasi questions na trino natin kay Ma'am Janet, no? So, baka ano pa to, nag-hangover pa tong mga friends natin dito. Pero that's a healthy hangover na ano, maganda yan. So for questions about copyright and yung mga misuse ng information, nakuha nyo naman yung information ni Ma'am Janet, so feel free to message her for a free 30-minute consultation. Okay, let's get more questions from our folks here. Meron bang mga websites sa Pilipinas para sa scientific sources or resources na open source? Sample mga journals na related sa Philippines. So I think she is, Resli ba is she? Saan ba si Resli?
Ay, lalaki po.
Sorry. Okay,
Yan ako na lang yung question, baka medyo magulo. Parang inaano ko lang kung may mga magre-research, any scientific research na related sa Philippines na nakapublish, meron kaya siyang area or website na pwedeng tingnan, or mostly Google lang talaga yung source na po? Kung currently pwedeng search sa Google, pero meron bang repository within the Philippines na nag-cater ng mga scientific research?
Specifically, my background is more on social sciences. However, I have recently partnered with a DA project, and we're working on more on biology. We bump into UPLB. They have their own online library wherein you can access the research of those. Are you familiar with with UPLB, right? Your focus nila is more on agriculture, agribusiness, yeah, forestry. So meron din silang parang microorganisms ata na research that I've seen there, but it's a lot. So everything that their graduate students have published and presented, they publish it in their online platform. So that's just one on top of my head. Um, there's some work, what I see with other universities is that, for example, they put up a portal, for example, X University. They might not have the repository of all the research of their students, but they refer you, it crawls to other websites. They created that kind of system that they can access they can refer research from other online learning sites because wala silang sariling library or archive. But for scientific, and that's just very limited, I guess, with what's the focus of UPLB, you can check on their own online library. Ayun.
Follow-up question. Hindi ko na kung part siguro to or any siguro within anong kayang branch ng government yung pwedeng mag-cater nan? National library ba or archives? Or university talaga?
I think I believe more on the university kasi mas mabilis ang process. Relatively mabilis. Not mabilis, but relatively better. Because even governments, if you're familiar with, even governments now consult universities for think tank, as a think tank. They, am I allowed to say? Pero diba, even UP Diliman wanted to volunteer to some government projects and you can consult them as the experts, right? There is UP Maritime Institute is like a government think tank. The government doesn't have much information about security, but yung academia kasi mas mabilis, relatively mabilis, yung pag-process ng information coming from the ground. Plus, there might not be research funding from the government, but it could be from everywhere. Kaya mas nakaka-produce ng research, verified information si universities.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Wesley, for your question. Wesley was asking about yung sa scientific databases. You know, we had Break the Fake actually have this project earlier this year. Kasi wala talaga tayong mahirap mag-centralize, no? So we in Break the Fake, di ba, entering into the pandemic, there was a lot of confusion. Ang daming naglo-launch ng mga apps, ang daming nagsicentralize ng data, ang daming mga efforts from different organizations that really magnifies na wala talaga tayong centralization like ng mga database sets natin, sobrang kalat. And even with tech community, sobrang kalat din. Like a lot of them wanted to launch their own apps about COVID. So that really magnifies na a lot of the efforts that we actually do, sobrang fragmented. We all work in silos. Sana in the future, when all of this, when we're all aligned, we're able to sit down and step back, sana ang lahat ng mga efforts natin are really gonna have this synergy, all gonna be working in same direction. We have one question from Ivan, but I want him to actually raise this publicly by unmuting himself. Ivan, can you say this? Ivan?
Hello. Hello.
Yes.
Good evening, ma'am, sir. So I like to ask, how about the Scribna site, ma'am? Is it a good or reliable site when it comes to researches? Kasi some research papers are accessible there. Then, yeah.
I know Script is also open source. Everybody can just upload the file there and it will be populated by Script. When you search on a topic related to the document, it can be referred to by Google. However, you need to check on if complete kasi alam naman natin yung parts of a research, 'di ba? And then sa baba, pag nakalagay yung name ng institution, academic man or government institution or non-profit or international organizations that sponsor the research, doon tayo makakapag-decide, makakapag-identify if reputable siya. Example, you see the uploaded file in Scrib. It was poorly written by a college student from some university. Will you use it as a reference? Pero if you see a document, World Bank research uploaded there, that's because with the credibility of the partner organizations which is attached in the research, that's verified. um who else in this group is like practicing researcher like I am? Kasi you can get funded to do research, and it's up to you to own the research, kasi you're the main writer, you're the main researcher, and it's up to you where to put that, because it's your copyright, it's your knowledge put into paper. So you can have all the online platforms where you post it out there, and including Scrib. Scrib is just another open source site. Anybody can upload information there.
Yeah, pero merong follow-up na question na, I mean, follow-up comment pala from Michael that corroborates that question coming from Ivan. Sabi niya, once a legit research is published in a predatory journal, does it still become a reputable source of information, or does it lose that reputation of being a reliable source of information?
With like I said, we are all familiar with the parts of a research, right? If nakalagay doon who is the sponsor or to whom is the research is submitted to, it doesn't deduct or deduce the veracity or the legitimacy of the research. Kasi if I have a research written like last year and I gave it into someone because they wanted to use it as a reference, and then for some reason they uploaded my research somewhere else that I didn't know of,
Yeah.
it doesn't lose the veracity of
Yeah.
it. Are you familiar with academia? In academia, if you're a premium user, the academia will send you an alert if your name is cited in other research. So if with the number of research that I did, sometimes some people reference make me cite my whatever I wrote. So if that the same document is uploaded in academia, without my knowledge, academia will send a notification to my email. Other websites don't have that. I think that's what's good with academia, because these people they're citing me. More so if your research is uploaded specifically 100% into these sites. Pero generally, your research, especially if you've conducted it with all right method, it doesn't lose any
Yeah.
truthfulness.
Pero let's ask Maiko, no? Kasi baka naman meron siyang reason why he's saying that once a certain research is published in a predatory journal, it loses its being reputable. And another thing also, I want to understand, what does he really mean by predatory journal? Maiko, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, hi. Good evening, Miss Jara and Sir Gab. Can you hear me?
We can hear you very clear.
Yeah. When I say predatory journal, we have journal sites which send email to random researchers, and then they would ask to have their research papers published. So that's predatory journal. And these journals definitely do not have, actually they do not have, let's say they're not recognized journals to publish research papers. However, some researchers do not have the mechanism to identify if these journals really are predatory or not. Because if you check online sources, some references would just present their list of predatory journals, but these are yet unconfirmed. So that's why I asked, because I had similar experiences before, same as with my colleagues. And actually, one of my research papers was also published by this Lambert Academic Publishing. Although there were copyright certifications, publications. I signed some certifications as well. We had agreements pertaining to royalties and the like. I was just shocked that my paper was widely proliferated in various online sites. And
Mm.
when I asked my students to have my paper cited in related research, some research personnel mentioned that my paper could no longer be cited because my paper was already cited in or was already published in a predatory journal. So it was
Mm. Yes.
also mentioned that it, although yeah, I did conduct my paper with veracity and I could verify that one, but the fact that it was already published in a predatory journal, somehow it lost its reputation being a reputable source of information. So that's why I'd like to have it
Oo
verified with.
nga. Yeah. Kaya pala, Jara, kasi may personal hugot nga siya. And totoo
Yeah.
yun na, doon ko pa na actually na so mas maganda kasi yung question when we really listen to them, no, napuput into context yung mga binabasa
Yeah.
natin dito sa
The
chat.
real circumstance.
Oo,
Oo.
nangyari kasi to, like for example, nung naghahanap kami, nagsascourge kami ng mga data sets nung gumagawa kami ng spreadsheet for COVID, obviously we also have to indicate kung ano yung mga unreliable sources. Right? So, in the same way, dun sa nangyari sa kanya, na tarnish yung credibility ng own journal niya. Hindi siya nasa site. So, what can you say about that?
Well, number one, you need to make sure that you get in touch with this lab, with this publishing. It's not you posted it. Do you have an agreement with lab?
The agreement was only to have my paper published in their journal. But when I searched Google, I already found out that my paper was published in different sites, not only in the lab journal itself.
Actually, right now, that's really the hard part of imposing transnational laws. We could have all the copyright laws in the Philippines, but we could not impose from whichever country that other site, the predatory site is based. For this, it's sad. And primarily, I have no other words to say, but it's disheartening that your research has lost credibility because it's just posted somewhere else, right? It's for that only reason. I believe the only way for you is that, yeah, mahirap maghabol. So if you can just put down if you can ask them to put down the document from their site, or here, let me just start with the context. How to identify a predatory site? Um, Number one, you see the affiliations. I mean, predatory site specifically for research. Um, if anybody of you like builds website, the credibility page or affiliations page or the footnotes of your partners is like one of the important things that we give emphasis. Right now, we were just talking about it. It gives you credibility who you're working with. If this website suddenly just put up a site and put all this information, it's you need to make sure that the all your partners are or all your partners logo are there to give credibility to you, especially if you're new in discipline, kasi it's a way for you to pierce into the market or to the online audience, and of course integridad mo yun. So if the website that you're reading on, the online sites that you're reading on doesn't have those kind of partners or affiliations, um, well, there's something wrong with the site. Kasi baka a teenager somewhere in the US just posted and put up this website and just put up a PayPal card and then ask you, want to access this document, pay here, right? Anybody can do that now. Um, for that reason, that's the very basic thing. Affiliations page or association or partners page is very important when you look at academic journals. If come look at the JSTOR site, there are a lot of US universities that that they partner with. um, And I also believe, let me just, yung mga iba na hindi, baka hindi nila alam. Kasi si sir, if you're instructor in university, kasi I know you get a certain kind of credits if you have your documents or your research published, right? And right
Citations, yeah.
now, right? The idea that you have your research published somewhere, it's already a credential. If your school is getting ISO accreditations, things like that. Hin, wow, that's a nice that's a nice suggestion, Leslie.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, kasi ibang level yung information na for academic research. It's heavier. It's it's where the government consults their decisions as a think tank, as think tanks. So kailangan natin ng yung mga universities or yung mga professors sa mga universities, sila yung baka pumapatol sa mga predatory sites. Kasi if they can suddenly just put up their, I heard this case, I'm not gonna name university. They put up the school just wanted to have accreditation. So they asked their professors, not all universities are research led. The universities that I've been to, we're highly focused with research. So regardless the teacher or the professor have like 9 units, like you need to make sure that you also like go out there and do research. You don't just stay in the four walls of the university. Pero may ibang universities that doesn't encourage teachers or professors to go out there and conduct field research. Pero during accreditation ng ISO, nire-request siya. So what they do, they make a research, doesn't have time for peer review, doesn't join academic conferences. And yes, that's the reason of academic conferences, to have your research undergo peer review, because your university might not have the right pool of people to critique your paper. Your university might not host a panel discussion wherein you can invite people outside universities, outside experts from the university, but you can join conferences. You, you can have your research verified, peer reviewed, and usually research conferences are affiliated with journals. Let me just cite you an example. Anybody of your political science background? So we have PSSA, which I am also a member, Philippine Political Science Association. So if I want my research published, because I'm a member of PSSA. I go to the conferences, and then I have my research peer reviewed. And if it passes the critical eye of our critics, of our experts, our political analysts, they're going to invite you to publish your paper in the journal, not just in the website, but as well as in the paper journal that they send the universities. So that's the best channel to have your research published, especially if you're a university professor na meron kayong requirement for such. Pero yung mga iba na hindi siya naisip prior the accreditation, you join these predatory sites. Or yeah, you became a victim like, I'm sorry, Michael. So yeah.
I think Michael also is like more asking about after the thing. Like, yes, you can actually go through all of those layers of risk prevention methods, but after the thing, what you can do. Because for me, if I were in his situation, I'm just gonna write a blog about it. If I couldn't really do anything about it, like I'm probably gonna write a LinkedIn note, then publish it in Medium, and make sure that I create my stance in there. Actually, Ma'am Janet also did like released a lot of blogs about the previous mga mishaps na mga brands, like for example Cebu Pacific, and the customer service that she was actually getting is super bad. So she had to publish it in her blog, digitalfilipino.com. Fortunately, Cebu Pacific is listening, and so they acted on her request. That's co-opting the idea that if you've gone through all the legal ways and the legal means to contact these people that you needed to contact, and what you want to protect here is your credibility and your self-interest as a working professional with research. So you have to do exhaust all means. But if it's all exhausted and no action has been done, then do your part, like exhaust all your platforms to make sure that this your stance is actually heard and it's all out there. I think people and brands and institutions are sensitive with their reputation, especially now with digital. Um,
Yeah,
more.
that's right. But let me give you another side of that, Gab. That is possible if you're someone like Miss Janet who was already a mileage,
Mm-mm.
right? So what if you're not? You don't have followers or viewers or whatever you write. What can you say?
Ako na ako na ba yung spotlight?
Sorry, I'm
Bakit
sorry.
bakit yung host na yung tinatanong? Okay, on my perspective to that is sa ano, borderless kasi ang digital. Okay? So it doesn't mean na wala kang traction as a person, wala kang audience. It doesn't mean na hindi ka magkakaroon ng mileage. Some people get famous overnight because their concerns are valid. Some their causes are valid. You know, some original like ordinary people can actually get a lot of traction. But then at the same time, the concern is valid. So to a certain extent, if you put it out there, kahit wala siyang mileage na makuha, just put it out there. Why does it matter so much, right? Kasi ang importante, when people are really crawling that particular content, they will actually go the nitty-gritty details of searching then sino yung nag-publish niyan. And if there are other references like cross-checks that like other publishing, other articles pertaining the same topic, correcting that particular information. Kasi yun yung beauty ng media, it's self-corrective. You expose some information on this portal, it gets corrected immediately on another one. So it's self-correcting. So I think the importance of just putting your information out there, kahit wala ka namang traction, audience, mileage, it's okay. Just put it out there. Um, we have, do we have one more more questions, everyone? Sige. Uh, so ano no, baka magtatatapos tayo ng mga ano earlier tonight kasi wala tayong masyadong questions. Pero um mag ayun si J Ford nagtanong. Maganda yan, J Ford, can you unmute yourself para interactive tayo? J Ford, nasa na siya? Nawala siya. Sir, malfunction daw yung screen. Hina daw yung net. Okay, so can we hear from other people here? Si ano, one of my students, Rose Ann. Rose Ann, can we hear from you? Ay, nahihiya to si Rose Ann kasi one of my top students in Mambahaw. So I actually teach, some of my students are here. I'm a teacher of the ICT. I teach them a lot of courses. I'm also working with Ma'am Janet. So we teach in the ICT. So ate, I have a question for you, no? Personally, is there any particular experience na you felt like, i-flip side natin yung question ha, nakagamit ka naman ng unreliable information tapos na-convey mo siya sa public? Or nakashare ka ng isang hindi reputable na online source pero at that time you were emotionally so
Yeah,
invested you did share it.
yeah, probably yes. I cannot cite something very specific, but I guess there's one. I remember there was a time that yeah, one of our partners is the US Embassy. That's why I remember that one. Do you remember the time um, that they said that the next ambassador to the Philippines was a female of Asian descent? She's a female, and then wow, like everybody's posting about it, and I shared it because women empowerment, and you're proud about it. You never cross check if the information is correct, because you got too excited na, oh, it's this time it's a female ambassador, aren't you excited? So it was it was faulty. Of course, when somebody calls my attention, that's when sometimes I check on it, when you and then I have to bring it down.
Ayun nga, sabi ni Sharms nung ano, 'di ba, opening, for the love of God, fact check before you post.
Yes.
Ayun, do we have more
Yep.
questions pa ba from our audience? So, last call, last minute. If wala na, let's just wait a little longer. I think wala na. So, that wraps up our conversation for tonight about reputable online resources. I hope that all of us learned something about finding information and online with by following protocols, like strict protocols, and making sure that we are not just going through Wikipedia, but really going through as well those resources that are properly vetted and peer reviewed. So, administrative wise, were the previews already uploaded at the website? Not yet. The ones that you can actually see in terms of episodes are the episodes for the week two. They're all live streamed on YouTube. For the episodes for week one, those sessions that came from Erica, Neil, and Mom Janet, we're still editing them, but they will be uploaded in the website as well. So just we will make an announcement in Media Civics Lab official chat and in the group for the posting of the videos and the lecture content. Other than that, tomorrow we will be having another session. So tomorrow is Thursday, I mean, and your teacher will be Ace Gapus. She is the CEO of Blogapalooza, the country's premier influencer marketing company, and she's gonna teach about digital influencer relations. Okay, so if you're all good, thank you, Ate Jara, Tita Jara, for the very insightful talk and covering the basics about reputable online resources. And I hope that our participants surely really learned a lot from our session tonight. And for all additional questions and queries about that, you can message Jara in her Facebook profile, which she could share to you using the official chat. So if you don't have any questions, thank you everyone and enjoy the rest of the night.